Well, welcome back to the Communication Mastery Podcast with me, Mark Berlinson. This is where we unleash the power of understanding to build bridges and not boxes. And I trust this is being valuable to you as you build teamwork in your business, as you invest in the way you communicate with others to turn a profit or to increase the progress towards your vision and your mission. And teamwork only grows when we can communicate effectively. That's why we meet together like this. And today what I want to say to you is that nobody listens to information unless they can engage with what its purpose is or what its outcome will be for them. Once somebody recognizes where this information is of benefit or of value in their specific setting, then they will engage. But most of our communication is wasted because we fail to command attention. And so I want to talk today about how to command attention in your communication. And I don't mean by being over-dramatic, because sometimes being over-dramatic is just as wasteful as being underwhelming. And I had a friend one time who every time they spoke would say, and this is very important. And every time they said something, they would emphasize it with, and this is very important. And it got to the point that I didn't listen to what they were saying or to them saying, this is very important, because it became so over-dramatic that I just tuned it out. So when I talk about commanding attention, I mean capturing somebody's energy, capturing somebody's focus in a way that enables them to really hear, to take in deeply below just the surface level of what it is you need to communicate, what it is you need to convey. So there are three very helpful ways to command attention in business communication, and I want to share them with you this morning. So number one would be to start with a compelling hook, a little bit like I did at the beginning of this episode when I said, nobody listens to information. You're like, what? Wait, this is a communication podcast. Why would I tell you that nobody's listening? It's to grab your attention to say, well, what is he going to say next? To get to the point quickly, but to avoid jargon and overly complex language. That means that people will not have to work to understand you, but you're capturing them with that first statement that is maybe outside of their frame of reference. Maybe it's a surprising statistic or a thought-provoking quote or a question that aligns with their priorities. So you're listening to this because you want to understand communication. When I tell you that nobody's listening, you're like, oh, hold on. That's not what I thought I was going to hear. And so it captures your attention. So an example would be, instead of saying, today we're going to talk about productivity, you could say something like, did you know that professionals waste about 21 hours a week through unclear communication? That's grabbing your attention because it's like, wow, is it as big as that? And so starting with a compelling hook will always help you to command attention in the interaction. I already mentioned a little of this, but the second way to command attention is to be concise and clear. So I said about getting to the point quickly with that commanding hook, that compelling hook at the beginning of your statement or your beginning of your interaction. But you need to continue that clarity through the rest of your interaction with a person or with a meeting or with a group, with a presentation. When people don't have to work to understand you, then you can keep their attention more easily. If you say something too complex, then it's going to send them off to think about what you said, and they will lose track of paying attention to what you're saying next. If you have a clear structure where you start with the main takeaway and then you break it down with some supporting details, that's going to help them to track with you. And provided you don't add too much content, then they'll continue to work with you, continue to follow you as you make the point you need to make. Adding too many details is always going to distract people. You need to keep it concise. You need to keep it clear. The common way of explaining how to present something is tell them what you're going to tell them. That's a simple and concise introduction. Then tell them, and then tell them what you've told them. So a final short summary of what you've said. Those techniques of keeping it clear are really going to help you to command attention in your next meeting. If you keep adding more stuff, people will then lose attention, as you may have done as I added more stuff then. That's why I did it. If you want more on that point, I'd suggest you go back to episode 4. We talked there about clarity in communication, or maybe even episode 7, where we talked about consistency in communication. Both of those episodes have got more for you on being concise and being clear. And then the third effective way to command attention is to incorporate some kind of emotional appeal or visual appeal to your content. So you can use visuals, or you could use stories. You could use analogies to make your message more powerful and more memorable, particularly to make it more relatable. If you can find an image or a story that's going to connect on an emotional level with your audience, whether it's an audience of one or an audience of hundreds, then that emotional connection is going to keep people engaged. So, for example, you could share a brief story of how a small change in communication led to a significant result for a team or for a client of yours. Recently, I was speaking to a group of young people about how childhood experience can really either prepare us to retain what we're given through those experiences, or it can drain us. And I used the visual analogy. I brought on stage a bowl or a colander, a sieve, if you like. And that visual analogy of, did your childhood create a bowl in your life where you could retain what was given to you, or did your childhood experience punch holes in your ability to retain? Which of those two would be true for you? And what now can we do about it? Having gained their attention, I talked about what you can do if you feel like life is always draining out through the holes, how you can change that. Maybe we'll talk about that in a future episode. But it had a deeper impact because I used that visual illustration of what it could be like. And actually in that interaction, a number of folks at the end were almost in tears as they realized that there was hope for them. When they'd had a lifetime, maybe 15 years, of feeling like their life was draining through all the time, I was giving them hope. And that was a very powerful way of commanding attention from the start. Again, you could get more on some of these areas by going back to episode 8 when we talk about the power of story. That's a very powerful episode for you to leverage in your communication. Or also episode 16, where we talked about nonverbal communication. Some of the techniques and the tips in there are helpful to you as you command attention in your next interaction. So if you know someone who hasn't subscribed to our podcast yet, I'm sure it's not you, but maybe you know someone, why not text them now and use that share episode link in your podcast app to send them a link to this episode and say, hey, why don't you subscribe to this? Let's talk about it together. And if you're not getting my regular emails, you could go to my website, scroll down a little, look for the free business communication paper button. It's partway down the homepage on my website at markburlinson.com. If you subscribe there, you'll get the business communication paper right away, and then you'll get a weekly email from me with more communication tips. So I'd encourage you to do that if you haven't done so already. So until next time, command attention, build bridges, and I'll see you next week.